Welcome to Frontlines. I'd like to welcome our guests from across the United States and Canada, throughout Europe and the Middle East, and of course in Armenia and Artsakh. As we near June 20th, the elections in Armenia have heated up. And as Garo had mentioned before, our goal here is to get beyond the mudslinging, if you will, and get to the hardcore issues that are shaping, that should be shaping the election process, and have those conversations with the movers and shakers in the campaigns from various parties and from various alliances, and that's what we strive to do today. And with that, I'd like to pass it on to Garo to introduce our guest. And there we go, Garo. If you could introduce our guest for today, we can jump right into the questions.
Thank you very much, Karnig. Good morning, everyone in Yerevan and everyone else in Armenia, in Stepanakert and everyone else in Artsakh. Good day in the United States and around the globe in the Armenian diaspora. I'm very pleased to have our guest with us today. He is Aram Vardevanyan, the spokesperson for the Armenia Alliance, led by second President of the Republic of Armenia, President Robert Kocharyan. A few words about Aram Vardevanyan. He is a PhD, a founder and director of the JP law firm, senior assistant to the Prime Minister of the Republic of Armenia in 2017 and 2018, assistant to the Prime Minister of the Republic of Armenia in 2016 and 2017 in issues of legal counseling, advisor to the President of the Constitutional Court in 2014 through 2016 in matters of legal counseling, head of the Legal Analysis Department of the staff of the Human Rights Defender of the Republic of Armenia, which these days is run by our dear friend Arman Tatoyan. Back in a few years ago, our guest Aram Vardevanyan was the head of the department specialist at Procedural Rights Department for Human Rights Protection. He has been a lecturer and continues to be a lecturer. Among his stints as lecturer and an instructor have been from 2014 to 2019, American University of Armenia, courses regarding human rights protection and justice system of Armenia. 2014 until now, in the Russian Armenian Slavonic University, instructor of the courses regarding criminal law, criminal procedure, human rights protection, and justice system of Armenia. He is an author and host of the radio program Your Attorney, Aram Vardevanyan, from February of 2015 through late 2016, member of the Chamber of Advocates of the Republic of Armenia. Principal subjects, occupational skills covered is primarily in the area of criminal law, my favorite area. And from 2011 to 2014, he studied and received his degree of Doctor of Philosophy in Law from the Russian Armenian University in Yerevan, Armenia. He also received a master's in law from American University of Armenia in 2013 with areas of occupational skills, specifically concentrating on law. And from 2009 to 2011, he obtained a master's in criminal law from the Russian Armenian University. And he holds a bachelor's degree going back now to 2005 to 2009 in criminal law and criminal procedural law at the Russian Armenian University in Yerevan, Armenia. Author of more than 25 legal articles regarding specific issues in constitutional law, criminal and criminal procedure law, and human rights. Aram Vardevanyan, Pari Egazes, you handsome young Armenian man.
The pleasure is all mine, and I hope everyone has a good day in, as you said, in Armenia, in Artsakh, and all around the world, especially in the States, in Canada as well. I have a lot of friends, by the way, in Los Angeles, especially, as we have a big Armenian community there. I have been in the States for more than 6 times. Although the last time I've been there, it was in 2011. So I really do miss coming there, and I really enjoy seeing our Armenian friends there and their approaches. I hope to have a good conversation with you guys. The pleasure is all mine.
We're happy to have you, Karnig. Aram is all yours for the first question.
Aram, thank you for joining us today. And as I mentioned in our opening, the campaign has heated up significantly, as we know. And those of us that are following the campaign have noticed that the campaigning among the political parties and the alliances that are engaged in the process has been somewhat of a roller coaster, with issues looking at the past, with issues sometimes personal attacks and things of that nature. I want to try to cut through that if I can today with my first question and ask you a question that's really kind of forward-looking. If you could kind of give us the four, let's say, leading parameters of the Armenia Alliance, what it seeks to achieve, rather than looking back and not necessarily as an alternative to the existing regime necessarily, but in terms of forward-looking prognosis, forward-looking projects. What is the goal of the Armenia Alliance, the Pan-Hayastan Tashink? What is it looking to achieve? And maybe we can use that as a springboard for further discussions.
I didn't get the last part of the question because of the connection, but as far as I understood, your question was about what are the, let's say, priorities and the things that we want to go forward with Armenia Alliance. Of course, sadly, this is something that I'm not proud to say, and not any of our teammates at Armenia Alliance would have liked to talk about this. Nevertheless, in 2021, we have issues with our border. We have issues with security. We have issues with defense. So this is the first and foremost issue that we have to go on to solve. And one of the things, of course, it has to be based on, let's say, a big renewal, changes, drastic changes in the field of defense. So we have, well, let's say, experienced specialists in the field of defense that are with our team, and we have a good project going there, because definitely things need to change. Just recently, we had a situation when Azeri forces decided that they can also enter into the sovereign territories of Armenia. And they even took 6 new POWs. Literally, this is the situation that we have in Armenia right now. So it's not only about Artsakh, as of now, it's also about Armenian borders, literally. So things have to change. Things have to change here, and it can be through various methods, including cooperation with OSCE, Minsk Group, etc. But nevertheless, it's not about what the current prime minister said. It's not about delimitation or demarcation. This is not the issue that we have at hand. So first, issues of borders, security, defense, etc. The second one, of course, is connected with the economy of Armenia. One can say that the first one and the second one are directly connected, because in order to have, let's say, good military tools, equipment, you need good economy for this. We have drastic problems in the field of economy as well. And we, as, let's say, a project, as a priority, we need to do everything possible to make Armenia a place where doing business is much more interesting for investors. When we look at statistics, the last few years, we have, let's say, almost a minimization of the amount of investors coming from abroad. By the way, from our diaspora as well. And this is one of the, let's say, reasons for the crisis that we have in Armenia. Because we cannot, let's say, have proper reforms if we do not have proper economy. So we have to change the situation in the economy as well. And of course, another priority which I can state is connected with, let's say, the international reputation of Armenia. As of now, any specialist could state this. It's not, let's say, something for us to be subjective or objective. This is something what the reality is. As of now, we do not have the authority, which is a necessity for us in the foreign relations. We do not have that reputation. We do not have the stability of a stable and predictable partner in foreign relations. So this also has to change. We have a situation with POWs which is not solved up till now, and we do not see the proper international pressure on Azerbaijan. You do not see it, I do not see it, no one sees this. So this also has to change. And in order for this, you need, let's say, a certain predictable foreign policy. And last but not least, I can definitely say that there have to be legal reforms in Armenia as well. Sadly, the most efficient, and again, I'm saying this sadly, but at the same time, I'm very proud of that fact. This is not something that should be, let's say, this should not be something extraordinary. In Armenia, we have one state institution, which is in full compliance with its mandate and is working full and in a most effective manner. That is the ombudsman. That is the ombudsman and his team. Now, just imagine if other state institutions would have been the same way. For this, we need certain, let's say, legal safeguards, but at the same time, we need a certain will. You know that the Ministry of Foreign Affairs has no minister and no deputies. When we have POWs, when we have, let's say, the sovereignty of Armenia violated, and we do not have a Minister of Foreign Affairs, we do not have deputies, and the reason why they resigned was because the current power is doing something very wrong. Literally, this was something what Mr. Aram Vardevanyan said. So these things have to change.
Aram, if I can just, I think that, I think it's important that you highlight those priorities and those points. I guess I'm going to ask a kind of a follow-up question as to perhaps a little bit more directed. What is the solution? In other words, how does the Armenia Alliance see itself as being able to remove Armenia from the current paralyzed situation that it is in with respect to foreign relations, with respect to the border issue? What levers is the Armenia Alliance looking to pull to make to affect a more let's say sophisticated foreign policy? I guess my question is, having identified those issues, the things that need to change, what is it that Armenia Alliance brings to the table that the existing governing authority has been unable to do? What exactly is it in terms of concrete terms that you think that the Armenia Alliance is going to be able to do differently?
If I can be brief on this question,
sure.
I can say that Armenia Alliance will bring stability, predictability, and let's say the system which is the most important thing for any state, is the political statement and the system of governance. It has to be stable as well. So in order for our, let's say, foreign policy to be effective, again, it has to be stable and predictable. You can't change foreign ministers every 6 months. This is destructive. But why do you change foreign ministers every 6 months? Is when you do not have, let's say, a stable, predictable path where you are going. Because if you do not have this, of course, there can be changes and you will decide to change, let's say, the Minister of Foreign Affairs. Just a quick example. I'm not going to go into past. I'm just trying to say what will be different and what has to be different. And this is a commitment that Armenia Alliance will give. It's absurd to change the heads of National Security Service, which is also a part of foreign policy, because this is how the system works. They are also always interacting with each other. Let's say ambassadors, representatives of national security services. We have a situation where every 6 months, again, the last 3 years, we had about more than 4 heads of national security service. When we were at wartime, we had 3 new heads of national security service. During wartime, this is not normal. Dear colleagues, this is not something normal. And maybe you might think that this is an easy answer, but we have to go through the reality that we are. I can definitely say that Armenia Alliance, based on the experience that our team members have, because we do have experience in state service in terms of, let's say, foreign relations, which can guarantee the stability and drastic change in it.
Okay, Aram, here I come. Let's think ahead past June 20th. And let's say that your alliance, the Armenia Alliance, is not only in government, gets into government, is in parliament, but it also is successful enough that leads a coalition or in whatever format is now forming a new government. What will that new government look like? Will it be a government of all those who are supporters of the second president, President Kocharyan, or will it be a government that will reach wide and bring in those who may not have been or who may not be part and parcel of the political party or parties that make up the Armenia Alliance? What are your thoughts on those?
Perfect question, Garo. I can directly answer it just because a few days ago I received such a question from another colleague. I can say that Armenia Alliance does not have a list of people who is going to have this position, that position, etc. That list is not made, and it has not been made on purpose, because there are a lot of people, this again, last week, for example, who are not members of the Armenia Alliance, who do not have been in this political, let's say, active phase, but are preparing their programs, but are passing their ideas, recommendations on how to do this or that, how to, let's say, implement the economic reform. And these people can become, let's say, part of our government team. Let's put it this way. So we are going to be flexible in this, and it's not going to be whether, let's say, Karnig or Garo or Aram have been with us, so therefore they have to receive positions, or let's say another person. But because, let's say, I don't know, Andranik has not been with our team, then he cannot be a part of the government, etc. We are going to look at professionalism, skills, experience. If a person who has all this, let's say, parameters is a member of the Armenia Alliance, perfect. But if there is, for example, someone better is not part of this team, then there is no limitation for this. The idea is to go, as you said, as wide as possible, but based on specific parameters. Experience, skills, knowledge.
Aram, I didn't mean to interrupt. If you want to finish your thought, go ahead.
No, I'm done.
Okay. So there are you know, this is no secret to you. We are, as a nation, unfortunately, very divided these days, and we have been for some time. Apparently, we were divided enough that occurred what occurred in 2018, and we are apparently, and not surprisingly, and perhaps very rightfully, divided post offensive onto Artsakh. And it is not a secret that some in our nation, some may say plenty in our nation, I don't know what the percentages are, but clearly are of the opinion that the second president, President Kocharyan, is a polarizing figure of sorts, a controversial, in the opinion of many, a tough guy in the opinion of others, and those who love him, those who dislike him. So what can you tell us, since you are the spokesperson of this alliance, what can you tell us about Mr. Kocharyan that perhaps dispels the notion of some of these fairy tales, or some of these not so fairy tale, nuanced recollections that people have of President Kocharyan? And you know, and if you want to elaborate further, tell me, you know, look back at his presidency, and looking back at Mr. Kocharyan's presidency, perhaps tell us what would his tenure as prime minister, if that is what occurs, what would it be different? How would it be different than his tenure as president? Would it be the same? Would it be different?
Thank you for the question. Just a quick clarification, by the way. I'm not literally in a direct form the spokesperson of Armenia Alliance. I'm sort of the representative who also has legal duties, because I'm the representative at the Central Electoral Commission. Well, as you presented my bio, I am specialized in law, but I try to be as flexible as possible. So I will try to be as effective in a way at this status as well. So I know a lot of my friends, my relatives in diaspora have told me that there are different and polarizing views as well about President Kocharyan. I can definitely say this, that a lot of things have been manipulated, falsified, and were presented as if it's the truth, but it wasn't. So there have been a lot of misleading information about President Kocharyan, a lot of it. I can just bring an example. You have heard a lot of legends and myths about Kocharyan. For 3 years, because I have also been in the field of law very actively, and I have been and still am a member of Kocharyan's attorney team, defense attorneys.
Defense team, yes.
There has been only one allegation against Kocharyan connected with the March 1st events, and it was connected with, maybe this might sound weird, but it was connected of him being the president overthrowing the constitutional order. So, for example, I know a lot of people thought that the tragic events of March 1st, the 10 deaths, were connected with Kocharyan. The current regime, the current government, the legal authorities which were directly appointed by this government excluded this option, excluded this myth that he had any connection with this. The allegations brought against him were totally about something else. Was that, for example, he did not have this or that power, that he should have acted this or that way. It had nothing to do, even in the sense of the consequences which had occurred with the 10 deaths. So this is something that can, and I can frankly say this to the public, that, dear people, you have been lied about this. I know that you have been lied for very long, but this is something which was a lie. And it's okay to be, let's say, wrong about something. I myself, for example, there were times that I was convinced of something, and then I understood that I was wrong. It happens. It's okay. It's nothing bad about that. So this is something that I can definitely state, that for 3 years, everyone was trying to find anything possible about Kocharyan, and this was the only thing that they did. So this directly excludes the myths that there were around him. And we as, let's say, if we try to be objective, if we do not have any, let's say, subjective emotions about this person, then we always have to be objective and look into facts. Of course, for lawyers to say this is very easy, but at the same time, I hope that people would also try to find this logic here. About the, let's say, 10 years of presidency of Kocharyan, I can say that, for example, I have a lot of friends who are attorneys in Armenia and have been working for much longer than me, and who have been attorneys during Kocharyan's time. You know, one thing that they always tell me is that there were so many spurkahais coming to Armenia at that time and doing, for example, buying small businesses, buying apartments, deciding to open a restaurant, all these things. So the economic atmosphere was unprecedented. This is not a good thing that, for example, the 10 years from 98 to 2008 were the times of unprecedented economic growth, because these are statistics. This is something that is not, again, subjective or objective. This is the truth. Our economy was growing drastically in the most positive way to say this. And spurkais were coming very effectively. Just as you know, for example, Mr. Ernekian, a billionaire from Latin America, who is still, by the way, an entrepreneur in Armenia, the most effective one, well, one of the most effective ones, put it this way. So again, he came from diaspora. By the way, a lot of people understand this. One of the ways for Armenia's economy to grow is to have the active involvement of diaspora, and especially in the field of economics. Because, for example, I can say this as my subjective opinion. I do not think that, for example, the relationship between the Armenian government and the diaspora should be about, let's say, oh, please come on, make donations. That should not be the logic. We should look at diaspora as partners, Because, for example, if a member of diaspora decides to come and start a business in Armenia, what does it do? It creates jobs. If a member of diaspora simply donates money, even a big amount of money, because just during wartime, all of us know what kind of involvement, what kind of hugely respectful involvement diaspora had. But at the same time, just imagine when we look at diaspora, not as people who try to make donations, but as partners. This logic should be there, this concept. And by the way, it was present during Kocharyan's time. Again, who can forget the role of Kerkonian, an Armenian legend, a national hero of Armenia. And his involvement was very active during Kocharyan's time. For example, I had the pleasure to talk to Aram Vardevanyan, by the way, about the times of Kerkonian's involvement and direct support to Armenia. So another thing that I can definitely state is that Kocharyan's time was the time of peace. There was not even serious, but let's say there is this term inboard skirmishes. There was nothing like that during Kocharyan's time. What do you think? If Armenia was that weak, would it be possible to have this situation? Of course not. If Armenia's army was weak, or let's say Armenia's presence in foreign relations was weak, would Azerbaijan not use that chance? By the way, in 98 and 2008, that was also the time when oil was booming in that country. So they had the, let's say, the means and the money. But at the same time, Armenia had it as well. And our borders were protected. Our international, let's say, reputation was pretty high. That was the time when we became members of almost all different international clubs. Council of Europe. We ratified the Human Rights Convention. A lot of documents, by the way. Please.
Aram, a quick follow-up. You mentioned the effectiveness of the Ombudsman's office, and Ombudsman Tatoyan has urged and appealed to all sides on the political front to refrain from hate speech or emotionally rhetoric. But I read in the last day or two where the acting prime minister is inviting President Kocharyan to a debate, and President Kocharyan is quoted, and maybe I read it somewhere that it's not accurate, you tell me, is quoted as saying, well, the only thing I'd like to engage in is pick a weapon to engage in a duel with the acting prime minister. I mean, is there room for this? What is the context of that? Because some might say, as I would, that's not really a statesman-like remark to make just because somebody, gets under your skin. I should know. I've certainly made very unstatesman-like remarks over the years, but I'm not running for office.
Garo, I can put it this way. The way that, let's say, the acting prime minister talked about coming to the debate, the heated, aggressive, hated manner that he was saying that, for example, Robert Kocharyan should come to the debate. If you look at the video, it was, let's say, highly emotional, let's put it this way, with abusive remarks, etc. And the response to it was what Kocharyan said, not in a, let's say, direct manner. It was more in the context of the conversation that was going on. It was in response to a question, etc., etc. And you might have noticed that, for example, the acting prime minister was during the campaign was walking around with Kocharyan's photo in his hand. So a lot of weird things are happening. But I can definitely say that this last 3 or 4 days were the most heated part of campaigning, especially from the side of the acting prime minister. I cannot even use the words, my ethics do not allow me to do it, because the words that were used were really absurd, put it in a mild way. But Armenia Alliance, Robert Kocharyan did not answer to it at all. There were direct abusive words towards our party. We did not respond. And by the way, this is the approach that we have. The example that you brought, that is not something which, let's say, is used last 4, 5, 6 days, because President Kocharyan himself made a statement, which all of us shared. And for example, I myself believe that is the most appropriate option, that we are not going to respond with any kind of similar wordings that the current regime uses. Not even one. Not even one. Our approach is going to be what Karnig started the question with when he just asked me a question. We are looking forward. We are looking forward. We are thinking about the drastic changes and the necessity of those changes that we have now. Sadly, we have such kind of challenges in front of Armenia that we should not have even time for this hate speech. And I believe that the Armenian society, and I hope the society in diaspora as well, our Armenian brothers and sisters, they also are tired of this, let's say, separation from various groups. We really should stop this. As you know, we had this separation of blacks and whites in Armenia. For example, that again, the only state institution which criticized this was, again, the ombudsman. Again, it was only the ombudsman. We believe that this kind of separation, this kind of heated atmosphere should be eliminated in our country. We should be united, not separated, especially based on the challenges that we have in front of us now.
Thank you.
Yeah, I wanted to interject, and you mentioned kind of the looking forward aspect, and I have to say that I'm not a politician, nor am I a political analyst, and frankly I don't care to be one, and especially in this environment, because I do think that some of the main points that you raised are perhaps I would say epic or historic moments in the lifeline of our nation. The issue of Artsakh, the issue of Armenia's borders, these are beyond campaign slogans. These are beyond political arguments and mudslinging, because what we're seeing, quite frankly, is a relatively weakened foreign policy, almost perhaps even a client state approach towards Russia at this stage. What is it that Kocharyan or the Armenia Alliance can do specifically that is not being done today? And I say this in really kind of specific terms, because there are people out there that say that the situation post-capitulation is so bad that nobody can get us out of this mess. There are people that are saying that this is the best that can happen. I'm hearing that that's not the best, and I want to believe that it's not the best that can happen, but I want to hear specifically from you as to what you believe those specific steps are. Are there levers that are not being pulled? Are there alliances that are not being made? Are there negotiation opportunities that are being missed? What is happening in your view that that where the train looks like it's so derailed? How can this alliance, and if it, as Garo said, if it is in the position to form a government, and from what we're seeing in various polls, the alliance is now neck and neck with the governing coalition. So it is a very real possibility that Armenia Alliance actually has the opportunity to form a government. And if it does, what is it? And I guess I say this more because I am interested in the international relations aspect of this. What is it that's not being done that Kocharyan believes he can do? Or what is it that's being done that the Armenia Alliance and its partners can do that is not being done? And I guess we know what's wrong. We can see it, especially from the diaspora. It looks very, crystallized. It's very clear here because we're not involved in the day-to-day politics on the ground. But these bigger pictures, right? The issue of the Armenian borders, the issue of Artsakh today, these things really matter to the diaspora, obviously. They matter to all Armenians. But what we're not hearing from any of the campaigns, quite frankly, is what are those concrete steps? In other words, what is it? Are there relationships with Putin that are negotiations with Lavrov that are not taking place? Are there negotiations with Iran and Georgia that could take place that are not? What is it that's missing? And I guess I ask this in a little bit of a lot of odds manner, if you will, because to me, it looks as if this stalemate, this approach to the current situation from such a negative, there is no way out approach, or we're doing the best that we can, is really not a real answer. So my question to you is, what concrete steps is the alliance going to take in the, let's say, the first 100 days, if it is actually able to form a government? How is it going to change the dynamic? Maybe that's the question. How is it going to change the dynamic?
Let me start from this, because you stated in your, let's say, question. I can definitely say that any kind of, let's say, ideas, options, presumptions that this situation cannot be solved anymore should be excluded. Even the merest possibility of it should be excluded. We as a nation should never even have kind of a burden of a thought, because we will never be in this situation ever again, because this is simply a crisis that has happened. Almost all nations had it. Well, the United States even had a civil war in their history, which means Americans were fighting against Americans. So every nation has a crisis. So this is the time frame, sadly, that we are witnessing, because let's put it this way. This is not a crisis that could not have been excluded. We had the chances to, let's say, get out of this crisis much better, in a much better way. So we did not. But nevertheless, this is the past. And I can definitely say that going forward, this issue will be solved. We will not remain in this situation. That's for sure. That's for sure. And I'm more than certain. Are there things that could have been done and should be done now differently? Of course. For example, the relationships with the Russian Federation should be, again, much more predictable and much more stable. So I hope that diasporans understand this as well. In this region and in this situation that we are right now, Russia is a dominant force which can be, let's say, a situation changer. So who is a person who has direct contacts with the president of the Russian Federation? Direct contacts, direct relations, and positive ones, by the way, really positive ones. So this is Robert Kocharyan. For example, just our neighboring country, Georgia, they do not have a politician, an ex-official, who has the capacity that Robert Kocharyan has. So should we be, let's say, excited about this? Of course we should, because we do have this capacity. So the current government could never have, let's say, effective relations with Russia just based on the past experience that they had. I'm not saying this is a bad or good thing. Just imagine a government which a few years ago was making, for example, active, very specific accusations against President Putin, came to power and started to say, okay, we don't have any connection with those statements. But everyone saw it. So does this give you predictability? Does this give you stability? No, it doesn't. But do we need predictability and stability? We need it definitely. We need it as soon as possible. And that can change a lot of things. Another example. What would you think if, for example, in place of the Secretary of State that the United States has, let's just say a politician, a member of Congress, would have started to have diplomatic discussions with other countries in place of the Secretary of State. And by the way, I'm not saying only the Secretary of State as the official, but also the institution overall. There have been reports that in Armenia, the ambassador of the United States is not having any discussions with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs over the last months almost, because all relations with the ambassador, with the representatives of the United States are conducted by a member of the parliament. Is this normal? No, it's not. No, it's not, because, for example, I can present, let's say, ideas, programs about Armenia Alliance, but I can definitely not be, let's say, a serious representative about how borderline security has to be reformed, because I'm not a specialist of that field. I can definitely tell you how legal reforms can be done, because I have, let's say, a specific knowledge in that field. If someone is a member of parliament but has zero skills in foreign policy, in how you should interact with ambassadors, for example, I have heard that it also requires specific skills. It's not as if something that you can just, how I'm talking to Garo, Karnig, the same way I cannot go and talk to ambassadors if I'm representing the state, because every word has a meaning which can be interpreted in various ways. And when you are talking to the ambassador of the United States, which is, again, a very important strategic player in the field, maybe you should be prepared, right? But no, this government sent a member of parliament. Well, their teammate, okay, I understand it. But is this logical? Is this proper? I don't think so.
Karnig, you have a follow-up? Go ahead.
Yeah, I do actually. I wanted to ask, kind of to reignite the question in one way, in particular with respect to the Artsakh situation. Obviously, the border situation now seems to have taken a much more significant role, let's say, in the politics and the politicking prior to the election, and it almost seems as if the Artsakh issue has been put on some sort of comfortable back burner, that, okay, it's there, Russia's there, Russia will guarantee the security. What is Armenia Alliance's view with respect to what is possible what is possible in Artsakh under the current situation, and what those steps would be? Because what would the steps be to not only guarantee physical security, but also guarantee cultural security, because there are increasing talks that were, the chatter that we hear regarding circumstances in Stepanakert, circumstances throughout Artsakh about, are refugees going to be returning? Are Azeri refugees going to be returning? There seem to be a lot of significant discussions taking place, except it's very unclear where those discussions are taking place, quite frankly. And that being said, I guess my question is, how is the alliance going to reignite Armenia's role as, if not the security protector, the protector of the national identity of Armenians in Artsakh today? What is the Artsakh agenda? Is it on the agenda, number one? And if it is on the agenda, what is the alliance's approach with respect to resolution of the Artsakh issue? What is its view on self-determination? What is its view on unity with Armenia? What is its view? I'd like to know, because we get so caught up in the politics. What is the alliance's view on Artsakh? What does it see Artsakh being in 5 years and 10 years? Actually, I'll take it back. In just under 4 years, when the opportunity for Russian peacekeepers to leave will be on the table?
I can try to answer it this way. The position has always been that Artsakh has the right to self-determination and has already exercised its right to self-determination. This was President Kocharyan's position always. That it's not about trying to give that right to Artsakh, but it has already exercised it. The same way that Azerbaijan exercised it by leaving the Soviet Union. How did they leave? They exercised self-determination. Artsakh, based on the constitution of USSR, also exercised self-determination, which is only logical. Have you ever heard this justification or this statement the last 3 years? No, you did not. Again, not going to the past, but I can say this. I can even address them. All our colleagues who are specialized in international law, who know, let's say, the legal precedents of the International Court of Justice, who know the advisory opinion of ICJ on Kosovo, who have studied this conflict as well, who have read the Madrid Principles, which was adopted during Kocharyan's time. Just make a comparison of how the ideology of foreign policy regarding Artsakh was implemented during that time and now. It's a very simple, let's say, task to do, very short one. For example, when people were talking about Kocharyan's time, they were saying that he had the idea of exchanging Maghrib with Artsakh. And this has been said by the highest representatives, officials of this government. If I would tell you that it has nothing to do with reality, what should be the consequence for people who, by being high state officials, have made this statement? There is not even one document, not even one communication where President Kocharyan would have agreed to exchanging Maghrib. But the rumors, the talks, drastic amount. And now this current government has brought Armenia to a situation where the talks are real. You have heard the statements of Aliyev, who directly says that he's challenging for Zangezur. And by saying Zangezur, he implies Sunik Mars almost in its entirety. What do we see is that, again, the issue of Artsakh has to be resolved only and solely based on the principle of self-determination, first and foremost. Second, President Kocharyan stated that there is room for intense, let's say, processes and only based on negotiations regarding Shushi and Hadrut, which can, if achieved, if we receive success there, we can say that let's say the borders of Artsakh, based on the status that it was during the first time when it joined USSR as almost a separate entity, would be recovered.
Aram, President Kocharyan is widely reported to be very active with the central headquarters of the Armenia Alliance. I have personally observed, and it's been widely reported, that he has visited certain regions and has plans to visit the Marses, if you will, in the days ahead as well. In as much as the current constitution, the way it is drafted, provides, one would say, excessive powers to the sitting prime minister, in as much as the current president who came into the presidency under that constitution vocally opined and criticized the matter on our program a few nights ago, that how it hampers the hands of a president and renders a president really beyond ineffective. Inasmuch as the Armenian diaspora is extremely engaged, interested in the sovereignty of Armenia to remain intact, but also the health, welfare, security, and the right of self-determination that you opined upon as to the people of Artsakh. What is the mindset inside Armenia Alliance headquarters if it comes into power, for lack of a better word, its plans to be inclusive and bringing the diaspora into Armenia governance? A question was posed in our comments on this program moments ago from one of my friends and one of the followers and viewers of Frontlines from San Francisco. It's not just, in my opinion, a Joe Blow. It's a person who has, I know for a fact, has been very vested with Armenia and Artsakh long before I was. And the list is a lot longer of folks of that mindset. True engagement, not just lip service, Aram Jan, and I'm not suggesting you were giving lip service, but you know, we all know in the American universe of political campaigns, we know it from the Armenian genocide issue. Every presidential candidate until Biden promised to recognize the genocide and danced around it during their tenure. Does the Armenia Alliance have any plans to be inclusive of the Armenian diaspora in Armenia's and Artsakh's future and in Armenia's governance?
One of the things that I can directly state is that the program that Armenia Alliance presented, it's a, let's say, campaign program, directly has a part about diasporans, and that the legal regulations regarding their engagement and participation, the limitations, let's put it this way, will be reviewed. This is something very important. This is, again, something which connects with the idea that diasporans are not simply people who make donations to Armenia. They have to be partners. And by the way, I believe that diasporans should feel also the responsibility by being partners. We can share the responsibility in that sense. Because, for example, there are a lot of cases when representatives of the diaspora who have, let's say, do not have the knowledge of the direct challenges that we have in Armenia, but at the same time, they, for example, present their ideas, but also harshly criticize governments by not knowing the situation fully. This is something, is a consequence of this division, of this, let's say, separation. Because if the Armenian government, the Armenian society here, and the diaspora, by being abroad, would be partners, not, let's say, in other relations, but just direct partners who share responsibility, who share the burden together, a lot of things would change, a lot of it, because the information would circulate, let's say the knowledge would be appropriate, etc., etc. I can say that this legal framework has to change. I know that, for example, President Armen Sarkisyan raised this issue a lot of times. That, for example, this he was bringing the example of Ara Darzi, for example, or well, who can be, of course, Minister of Health for any kind of country, and any kind of country would only envy the other one for having that kind of person with that authority, with that reputation, etc. Of course, there are regulations which are at the constitutional level. For example, in order to be member of the cabinet, according to the constitution, you have to be only a citizen of Armenia, only a citizen of Armenia. And for the last 2 years, you had to be permanently living in Armenia. For example, this is something which limits the representatives of diaspora to come and engage in the process, because I do not think that having a requirement that diasporans should simply reject their other citizenship, that's not something, let's say, proportional as well. Because if, for example, Aram has been living in the States, is a citizen of the United States of America, well, is appropriate in his rights and duties towards the United States, but also is a citizen of Armenia. If an offer would be made to him to come and work at the government, why should he be obliged to reject his citizenship, for example, while he was living there for 20, 30 years? I think a mechanism for example, an estoppel to, let's say, how to say this, to put on hold the status of citizenship of another country, but not to reject it. Because that would make, again, life difficult for our representatives of diaspora. Because I know a lot of people who are good citizens of the United States of America, are also good citizens of the Republic of Armenia, are dual citizens. But at the same time, they would not like to be put on a situation to choose a citizenship. That's not something right. So this kind of things have to change. Of course they have to. But another thing that really is something important, and I'm not saying this to just throw mud on the current government, but at the same time, the unprecedented amount of money which was passed to the Pan-Armenian Fund during wartime, up until now, the Pan-Armenian Fund has not presented a comprehensive report on how the means, the money, the funds were used. Up until now.
You're referring to Armenia Fund. Is that what you're referring to?
Pan-Armenian Fund, the Armenia Fund.
Yes, yes. Okay, and also, Aram, so that our viewers do not get the wrong information, Armenia does allow for dual citizenship. It just does not allow a dual citizen to be a cabinet member. Isn't that correct? That's what you meant. Correct.
Could you please repeat the question, because the connection was...
The Republic of Armenia currently does allow for dual citizenship, because I know many of my friends who are American citizens and Armenian citizens, but it doesn't mean that one who is an American citizen, and I'm using American citizenship as an example, one who is a citizen of a country other than Armenia, but also a citizen of Armenia, that person cannot be holding a cabinet level position, correct?
Cabinet level position or Congress, let's say parliament level position.
Right. So do you think that the Armenia Alliance would be in support of a constitutional reform or a modification or an amendment that would allow some level, doesn't have to be, doesn't have to be the cabinet minister, it could be the deputy cabinet minister, or it could be the chief of staff of a cabinet minister. Do you think that the Armenia Alliance is motivated enough that, should it be in government, it would support such a constitutional referendum?
I can definitely say that the commitment to change something, at least at the level of legislation, because let's say constitutional amendments are, again, something very, let's say, intense at this stage. I believe that prior to constitutional amendments or the agenda of constitutional amendments, the, let's say, issues at hand, the challenges at hand have to be solved prior to it. So, but at the same time, I can say that there are certain opportunities, and I'm saying this as a specialist of law, that at the legislation level, at the level of laws, without changing constitution, certain changes can be made for diasporan members to be members of cabinet. Well, not members of cabinet, but the example that you brought. Let's say to be in state service.
Aram, can I ask a kind of a direct question here? And I'm sure that the Armenia Alliance has considered this issue, because it is an issue that has galvanized the voting population, quite frankly, and throughout the world. Can Robert Kocharyan promise that?
The connection was lost for me.
There we go. Sorry.
The last idea that I was saying is that at the legislation level, certain changes can be made based on the example that Garo brought, that for members of diaspora to be more active in state service. And this is a commitment that Armenia Alliance took.
And I want to ask a direct question on a point that we raised a little bit earlier, and that is the border situation. Can Robert Kocharyan promise that the borders will be protected in this particular way? Can he promise that the Azeri troops will be leaving the borders of Armenia? Is it, and when I say can he promise, does he have mechanisms that he has in place in order to achieve that? Is there a strategy in place either by President Kocharyan or the alliance itself as to how that can be achieved? And the reason I ask that is because in the discussions that we hear regarding the border situation, quite frankly, it feels that there are a lot of avenues not being discussed. There clearly seems to be this potential for increased escalation. There seems to be somewhat of a fear of escalation, which is understandable in a post-war scenario. What are the mechanisms that the second President Kocharyan and or the alliance have in mind? I'm sure it's something that has been discussed with the alliance in terms of a platform. You know, how can that take place? Is there a promise that the alliance is making to its constituency, saying that this is a priority and this is something that we will achieve? And if so, how would they achieve that?
I can say that it is a priority, it is a commitment, and it is a promise that President Kocharyan made. And if you look at his biography and at his previous statement, the promises that he keeps those promises. And he does not have the habit of, for example, saying that, you know, I made this statement, then I changed this statement. In this sense, we are talking about, a very different politician, a very different person. I can also say this, the question that you are raising is something which has, let's say, in-depth necessity of knowledge. I can say that just a few days ago, Robert Kocharyan not only had, let's say, visits in Marses, in regions, and a lot of people come and welcome Kocharyan there, by the way, which is very interesting. And this is one of the, let's say, indications about the social support raising towards Kocharyan. There are, of course, videos and pictures being posted around the social media as well as news agencies. But I can say this by being there in person. This is coming from me. But what I wanted to say is that just a few days ago, President Kocharyan met with various representatives of the military and national security services, a lot of, let's say, 3-star generals present, 2-star generals. One of the latest people who was the head of the National Security Service, who was again, he wasn't fired in comparison with others. He was the one who resigned. I'm talking about Aram Vardevanyan, who, by the way, was in the field of Garo and I, in the field of criminal law, criminal procedural law. He was the head of the investigative service at the National Security Service. Then he became the head of the National Security Service overall and worked for a few months, and then again he resigned. This happened in 2020. So this person was also present with the meeting with President Kocharyan. And I can say that they discussed it, the issues of borders. They exchanged certain information which was not for the public. But at the same time, afterwards, President Kocharyan again gave the guarantee, gave the assurance that the situation will be solved. This is something important that this commitment is made. But at the same time, a lot of talks are happening and circulating that we still do not know all the information about the documents which have been, let's say, literally signed and commitments which was taken by this government. This is something which is important as well. There are these talks. I'm not saying this for a fact, but there are these talks that, let's say, the only document that was signed is not the November 9 document.
Karnig, may I?
Please.
So one of the members of my staff earlier today was marveling at the media campaign that is underway by the Armenia Alliance. This is a 22-year-old young Armenian who is a supporter of your alliance, and he directed me to take a look, and I did, and it was very well done, very professional, very top-notch, and it got me to thinking, where is the funding coming from? If you may elaborate on that. Is that crowdfunding? Is that supporters? Is that donors? Where's the money coming from? Because it seems to be a very well-run, but also very costly campaign.
I can say that in comparison with other campaigns, for example, I was also engaged in the 2017 campaign while working as an assistant to the Prime Minister, Karnig, by the way. At that time, he was also very active in the campaign. It's not, let's say, the costs are not that drastically different, almost the same. The funding and, let's say, how the money is, let's say, formulated for the fund, because all the costs are made through the fund, by the way, which is, let's say, open, transparent, and accessible for the Central Electoral Commission, almost to the public as well. As you know, Armenia Alliance is a group of 2 political parties, of various, let's say, active participants and supporters. The 2 political parties have their infrastructure. For example, the Armenian Revolutionary Party has a history of, let's say, support and infrastructure. We are going for 100 years in that case. I can also say that there are a lot of donors who are actively participating for the fund. We made a statement. We were, by the way, the first political player who was the first one when the law permitted to open the fund for this, let's say, for the commercial part of campaign. And we've asked our supporters to be as active as possible in transferring funds to the fund. At the same time, there are this bit weird legal regulations, even limitations, which, for example, do not allow international, do not allow even our diasporans to make, first of all, transfers to the fund.
Right.
I don't know why, but this is the regulation. Another example is that legal entities cannot make transfers to the fund. So only physical entities can make, let's say, the transfers. So this is a bit making the process difficult, but nevertheless, we receive a lot of support from various people, let's say, from famous people to not famous, to let's say, from all our brothers and sisters. And I can say that the campaign is going pretty well. At the same time, if we make comparisons, I can highlight an issue. If one can think that Armenia Alliance is, let's say, spending, is making costs with this, okay. But the ruling party is directly using administrative resources, directly. You can scroll and find it in the internet that there are, for example, more than 10 police buses going round and round for the meetings that the acting prime minister has. More than 10 buses filled with police officers. By the way, some of them have a uniform of a police officer, some of them do not. Why is this happening? I'm not the person to answer this. I can only say that the electoral code does not allow this. Simply does not allow this.
Aram, I wanted to, if I can take you back just a little bit at the beginning of the campaign. Clearly, over the last few weeks, the Armenia Alliance has made a significant move in the polls that we're getting. From a very low percentage at the beginning of the unofficial beginning of the campaign, if you will, to really at this point running neck and neck. Given the fact that there are only 7 days left until the election, what is the target for the Armenia Alliance right now? Clearly, it has supporters that support the alliance regardless. But my question is, are you targeting a particular sector of Armenian society? And why is that? And that's the first question I have. And the second question is, those that don't support the alliance, because I'll be quite honest, a lot of what you've said today are not things that people would disagree with, right? I mean, the idea of the inviolability of the borders, the more traditional approach to Artsakh sovereignty and self-determination. These are things that a lot of people can associate with. My second question, perhaps you can answer this first if you like, is what is preventing, from the campaign's perspective, what is preventing a portion of the population to join the alliance and push it over this neck and neck race? Is there, in other words, what is the greatest weakness of the campaign at this stage? It's understanding, of course, that it's made significant successes. What is the weak point? What is it that you want to focus on in the next 7 days that you feel will get the alliance where you want it to be?
That's a very interesting question, by the way. I can say that the greatest difficulty that we have been facing in trying to challenge this and trying to change this is that in a lot of Mars's villages, let's say small communities, the access to information is very low. Usually people receive information from the Armenian public television, and that's it. So the only source of information is through the Armenian public television. If you have the chance to watch Armenian public television, you would not hear anything about the issues that are present. You would not hear anything about what I am saying and what Armenia Alliance is presenting. We have great issues at the Armenian public television, very serious ones. And a lot of people have been receiving information only from this, let's say, pipeline, only. And which, of course, presents difficulties, because when we are trying to present ideas, let's say the issues at hand, how we are going to solve them, there are people who are saying, who said there is this issue? Like, what are you challenging? For example, there are people even who do not understand why snap elections are being held. This is a problem. And by the way, our people, our brothers and sisters, our representatives of the country, they are not the ones to blame. You cannot blame them. They receive this information. Also, I can say that another issue is the, let's say, very tough amount of false information. False news, fake news, all this. This is also present. Have you ever seen one of the, let's say, representatives of this government being frank and, for example, saying that the whole criminal trial against Robert Kocharyan was finished with the decision that it was unconstitutional? Have you ever heard one of them say this? That, for example, Robert Kocharyan, who was under arrest for 2 years, in reality, should not have even been prosecuted for 1 day. Because the whole investigation, the whole process was unconstitutional. A thing that we have been saying from the first day. For example, I've been saying this starting from 2019. Have you ever heard one of them say this? No. And a lot of people, if, for example, let's say our political atmosphere was fair, then we would have noticed this, right? Because we would not make, let's say, false allegations against each other. But again, false news, fake news, all these things are, again, a challenging thing that we are trying to fight against. We have been successful, but there is still a road to go there. There are still things that need to be done in order to try to provide a reality to a lot of our people. Because again, there are a lot of false news, fake information, false information that have been spread around for years, and which is very difficult to challenge now. Because, for example, the government is not going to say, you know, well, okay, this was false news. They simply use silence in those cases. They do not refer to the question. And again, this is the overall challenge. This is the thing that I can say. At the same time, we do see that the support towards the Armenia Alliance and to our team is growing, steadily growing. And we still have, well, in Armenian time, 8 days to go. And I can say that one of the slogans that we have is that we are going to We are going for a strong, unified Armenia. And we are more than sure that everything is going to be well in Armenia. Everything is going to be good in Armenia. So let's say one of the ideas that we have as well, which is might sound simple, but it is very important. We have to bring back optimism in Armenia. We have to do this. Because I can say this by living in Yerevan in Armenia, the moods for simply living the country are raising. Because there is this constant panic in Armenia. This feeling.
Simple question, yes or no answer would be sufficient. Does President Kocharyan plan on debating the acting prime minister before the 8 days are up?
Yes or no answer. In that case, I would say no.
Okay. All right.
Because just a brief comment. We do not see the logic of having a debate with him. Just based on the hate speech that he's making this last days, just the way he has been approaching to questions, saying, for example, I am the #1 person responsible, but I'm not the one to blame. You see, when the logic of a person is this, when in one hand you have a person who has fought himself for Artsakh. By the way, Robert Kocharyan was in the field in the 90s. He was not only the, let's say, the head of Artsakh, but he was also literally, personally himself participating in war, fighting for our country. So this is one type of person. And then we have the current one, who, for example, did not even say, please excuse me, because I have been, presenting false information for 44 days. This is, of course, a very different topic, what happened in the 44 days. But believe me, I was receiving information about the situation in Artsakh, in the country. Was more than sure that we are already going for Baku. Because this was the information that was being presented for 44 days. So, debates, no.
If I can just jump in here real quickly, Garo.
Yes, I'm done. Thank you.
Yeah, you mentioned, Aram, the idea of unity, and in our last Frontlines, when we were speaking with the president, President Sarkisyan, he mentioned that there, and I guess when you talk about the, well, let me just back up. President Sarkisyan spoke a lot about the fact that, you know, the idea of unity, national unity, from a very physical sense, that people in Yerevan, that it felt like a city-state as opposed to a nation, where the concerns of Sunni were not necessarily recognized or felt in Gyumri or in Yerevan, and that concept is a really difficult one. I think it's shared, you know, it dovetails well with the issue that you raised about optimism, but it also plays on this idea of reality. The president also mentioned the fact that we are living in a kind of a post-reality world in Armenia where, whether it's fake news or bots or Facebook, and there's this real disconnect. I think the war and its aftermath has, at least for some, brought the Armenian world to some sort of reality. But I have to say, the elections seem to have shifted that course again, where everything is, mudslinging, fake news. It's taken a dive, let's say, in that respect. I think Kocharyan himself is a very real figure, right, as opposed to a social media type figure. That being said, how is it that is there a plan on this point of national unity, on the point of not necessarily political unity but national consciousness? What is the alliance? The alliance has adopted the name Armenia, the Tashink, right? And what is the plan for this? Almost like this, this national reawakening. Clearly, optimism is one aspect of that. But for years, we were able to rally rally around the successes in Artsakh, the development of Artsakh, the development of Armenia in the international world, in international organizations. What is it? What are the cornerstones that the Alliance sees for that reawakening? And we need it. I 100% agree with you. We need that. What does the Alliance see? What does President Kocharyan see as the cornerstones of that rebirth? How are we going to find ourselves in that optimism, with that optimism, with the idea of national consciousness, understanding that we are indeed one people, understanding that what happens, in Sunik affects Armenians globally, it affects Artsakh, it affects Yerevan. How do we do that? How does the Alliance do that?
It's not something that you can say that I will adopt the law on national consciousness and I will imperatively use it on all people, and there we will have national consciousness. It's not something that you have to do 2 steps for this, and you will have a result. I believe that it's something that the government has to do through its policy development and through its statements that it makes. If you have a government which literally says that there are black people and there are white people in Armenia, if you have this situation, of course, you would not have national unity. Now, if you have a government which doesn't say this, which does not make this separation, which goes further, says that we have to be unified, makes, let's say, the national policy about state unification. For example, Armenian public television does not present false and, let's say, deliberately false information, but talks about national unity. I can say that this is something that has to be, let's say, all opinion makers, opinion changers. For 24 hours, we have to talk about this, literally. Because this is something that we need like air, like, I don't know, this is something that is the most, required thing at this stage.
Mm-hmm.
After war, this is what we need the most. And for example, after war, one of the first things that this current government said is that the time for revenge of the people has come. This is the first reaction that this acting government made. First reaction. Just hours after signing the November 9 document, when a lot of people were literally crying when they heard about this news. A lot of people were in agony, were in, let's say, highest level possible of aggression. The first reaction of the acting prime minister was that so maybe this sounds simple, But one of the things that we need for national unity, for national consciousness, is literally to change this government. We do not have, let's say, the opportunity for us to have blacks and whites, to have, we hate these people, we love these people. No, all of us are Armenian people. We should not have the time and let's say resources for this kind of talks. And if I may, dear Karnig and Garo, my phone is already, well, trying to, I don't know, blow out of proportion. So if I may use this opportunity to say thank you so much for this conversation. I honestly enjoyed this. And the, let's say, positive or negative thing of this is that after talking with you guys, I really wanted to come back and visit the States even more because I haven't been there for a long time. And by the way, when are you planning to come to Yerevan?
Sooner than we are expected, perhaps. I'll discuss it off the air with you afterwards.
Perfect. Perfect.
Karnig?
Aram, I want to thank you very much for joining us. It has really been an enlightening discussion, and we really appreciate you answering some very difficult questions and really explaining the vision of the alliance in this particularly unique time in our history. With that, I just want to pass it off to Garo for his closing remarks, and we will then finish up and hope to speak with you again soon.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Karnig. I want to thank you as well, Aram, for taking an inordinate amount of time from what I know to be a very busy number of days behind you today and a number of days ahead of you. You brought up very interesting things for us all to think about and elaborate in our living rooms with one another. And continue the discourse. But one of the most important things that you brought up was the elimination of the concept of black and white. I should say that black and white is a phrase that was ugly when it was used, but more so, it is ugly when it is in practice today. And unfortunately, it is in practice today widely, even within folks who believe they are in service of an ideology, in service of one concept, one party. There is division among us. There are family members in the diaspora who disagree with one another. There are family members, no doubt, in Armenia who have differing perspectives. But my hope is that with the national emergency upon us, with foreign enemy on Armenia's soil, at this very minute, firing in direction of Armenian villages, my hope is that people knock it off, look ahead, think of that which unites us, and think of colors red, blue, and orange for a change, and think of the white sliver that separates the red, blue, and orange as the Republic of Artsakh flag. Think of those folks who gave their lives, the parents and family members who stayed behind, mourning the loss of their martyrs, our martyrs. I want to say as a closing note, this program and the announcement to have Aram on as our guest received a variety of responses, which was at once encouraging and a bit disturbing. I want to make it clear, Frontlines is a program that was created as a vision of Karnig Kerkonian on September 27. Karnig Kerkonian and myself are members of the board of the Armenian Bar Association, Board of Governors. We also are the co-chairs of its Armenian Rights Watch Committee. But nothing we say on this program, nor the choice of guests we elect to have on, reflect one way or the other on the Armenian Bar Association's endorsement, agreement, or disagreement with anything we say, do, or anyone we have on. I want to be very clear because there was a comment talking about the ABA going in what direction or whatever direction. Whatever happens here, Karnig and I are responsible for it, and I will be accountable for it, but nobody else. Nobody else. Aram, when I talked about a debate, I'm going to put it out there. President Robert Kocharyan and Acting Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan are cordially invited to come on Frontlines, not talk to one another, but answer questions from my co-host Karnig and I about issues. And the audience should hear what the answers to those issues are, not a back and forth, but the answers to issues. They don't have to come on Frontlines, but they should do it somewhere. I'm a strong proponent of political discourse because it kind of stops the rhetoric and puts people on the spot to speak truth to power. And let us hope that truth to power will give us a united Armenia post this Artsakh war, post this aggression onto Armenia proper territory. And we will see you all in Yerevan, and we will see you all in Stepanakert. Aram, you have a blessed day. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you. Thank you so
Aram.
much.